As organizations rush to implement AI, two unexpected departments often create significant friction and even derailments: finance and HR. Today, we'll explore how traditional approaches to budgeting and performance management can undermine AI initiatives due to lack of alignment with the collaborative, adaptive nature of AI. We'll also examine how early engagement with audit and compliance teams can prevent downstream challenges and support successful transformations. So let's take a look and remind ourselves of the type of work that we're dealing with. What is this AI work? There's some specific characteristics that we need to pay close attention to. And this is consistent with what we've learned from Agile. So let's take a look at the context of the work. This is highly volatile, changing, ambiguous, uncertain type of work. We can't, unless it's the platform itself, the AI platform itself, where yes, there we can think of an AI project. We can think that there is a series of steps that need to be followed in order to create the infrastructure so that teams can use the AI technologies. But once we're past that, we're really looking at developing products and services on top of that that leverage the AI technology. And when we are in that space, we need to be thinking that things are changing constantly. We need to be highly adaptable and we need to be continuously learning. The stuff that's available this week could be significantly changed next week. And that's not hyperbole. That's the space, that's the speed at which this is happening. So we need a high degree of adaptability, continuous learning in teams. And these teams need to be empowered to be thinking creatively, looking for what's available on a daily basis, and then adjusting their plans based on what becomes available at any given point. And this isn't just a single team that we're working with. When we're working with AI, it has so many areas of influence that we really need the plurality of many groups looking at the implementation from their perspective and then offering the guidance and the decision making in order to put the implementation together. So we're talking about cross-functional teams. We're talking about a lot of teams from different perspectives and single teams with many perspectives coming together and working collaboratively to figure it out as they go. So there needs to be a lot of flexibility and collaboration, and needs to be a recognition that the definition of the work, there's a dynamic scope of work that is continuously evolving the requirements needed for implementation. As we implement things, we discover things, better options or potentially dangers and risks of following a particular path. And it's not until we've done the implementation that these things become apparent. That's why we can't plan them up front. So when we're working with that type of environment, we need people who are highly innovative, who are eager to experiment, want to try different things. That kind of approach clashes with traditional perspective and approach to managing work, because traditional approach is not adaptive. Traditional approach is very rigid. Traditional approach establishes that we spend time figuring it out, we come up with a plan, we implement the plan. The thing that in the AI space, there is no time to do that. If we spend the time, we're going to be at planning, figuring it out for far too long. We're going to miss the opportunity, the time to market opportunity, and we're going to find ourselves lagging behind. That conservative, risk averse approach is not going to serve us well in the AI space. This is the whole reason why Agile emerged, in order to give us an approach that manages risk, that reduces the risk. We can't eliminate it, but manages in such a way that it allows us to always move forward without being constrained by the requirements that waterfall and traditional approaches have established over years. So the siloed approach to doing work doesn't work. We need this collaborative, emergent, highly flexible work environment in order to implement AI initiatives because the nature of the work requires it. So with that context, let's look at what's happening on the finance and HR side. Finance has developed for decades, if not centuries, an approach to funding that assumes and expects to have clear definition of the work that needs to be done. There needs to be a task list. There needs to be some kind of statement of work, even the words that we use, a statement of work. We have a clear definition of all the things that need to be done, and that's what finance agrees to fund. And as we execute, we just simply cross off the list. Okay, this got done, this got done, this got done, and that's how we measure progress. That's it's not wrong. It's a perfectly valid way of doing things as long as we can define them clearly up front. I've talked before about the difference between simple and complicated work as opposed to complex and chaotic work. Where AI is concerned, we're not in the simple and complicated. We're definitely in the complex and chaotic. And in the complex and chaotic, we don't know. That's the honest truth. So what's happening is we could have a certain degree of business agility truly established at the team level. The team may have already adopted enough practices and mindset, even both of them, to have that already in place. However, where finances require them to deliver a clear plan that can be priced and costed and then funded, this is where the rub happens because the team can't do that. And it's not a matter of going back to the team and tell them you haven't thought about it enough. You need to think about it better. It's not about putting the teams down and telling them they're not good enough. That's not going to help anything. And the reality is that they honestly cannot know. They have to do some work in order to move from their current perspective that is limited just simply because there isn't enough information so that they can move to another position and from there make new decisions and so on and so forth, making the adjustments that allows them to iteratively move forward. This iterative approach that requires discovery and emergence of the requirements and also the technical capabilities. Remember what I said at the beginning. Some of these technologies are changing literally overnight to what's available this week. It's going to be different next week. We need to be able to adapt. And if we don't allow the teams to do that, we could be locking them into the things that are available today. And by the time they're done with implementation, what they've implemented is already outdated. That doesn't make any sense. This is the nature of the work. And the pricing, the funding of the work doesn't align with that. The traditional finance systems are not designed to deal with that variability. That's the problem. So when the finance requires teams to come to give them a clear plan and put that into a work management system, and we're going to track against that, we're asking the teams for something that they cannot deliver. So in practical terms, what happens when we force teams, we tell teams, you have to do it. Do teams push back? Some do, not successfully, because the reality is that the business doesn't have another way of funding, supporting what the work that they're doing. There's only one option. If we don't address that, the only thing that teams can do is lie. And it's not a malicious lie. It's not something that they're doing out of deceit. It's just simply lying because they have no other option. We haven't given them an alternative. So what they do is that with the best intentions, to the best of their ability, they guess. That's a lie. And this is why we end up with so many projects running over budget, because the reality is the teams didn't know. And the teams are judged for, well, you didn't think about it. No, it's that they weren't given the proper environment to work in the flexible way that is required in order to be able to deliver what we're doing, specifically in AI. We haven't given them enough time to work through the layers, to figure them out iteratively. They can't do that up front. So this is a real point of contention. So what do we do about that? Do we continue creating this impossible friction, this impossible struggle between finance and delivery teams? Or is there a better way to deal with this? We're not going to be able to get the answers that finance is looking for, that traditionally has expected. That's the point that we need to get across. And if we can't give them, or at least give something that is reliable, then how do we go about that? This is the whole point about shifting our mindset from projects to products, where products and services have a life cycle, and that life cycle is built on the capabilities, we call them value streams. So let's take a step back. This is a huge topic. I'll talk about it in the future, but as a brief introduction to it. What we want to look is not in a collection of tasks and known activities that the teams can do, and then create a long list and measure against that. That's not the approach that we want to do. That's the traditional approach, and that's what we can price out. Instead, what we want to do is we want to look at our company, the company that's working in this flexible, high business agility modality. We want to look at the business capabilities that it has. And these business capabilities are delivering some type of value. If you have a company that is primarily focusing on pharmaceutical, okay, IT may be indeed a very important value stream that produces certain value, but if we can't compare that against the pharmaceutical capabilities that the company is delivering, pharmaceutical companies aren't IT companies. And this is a common problem that happens. Many companies, because IT is the delivery mechanism, tend to think of themselves, or at least behave in a way, as if they were IT companies. They're not. They're financial companies that use IT to deliver products and services. They are healthcare organizations that use IT to deliver the products and services. These are two different value streams. And the investment that the company wants to make in each of these value streams is different. Naturally, they're going to want to put their highest investment in what they are experts at, in the highest value that they're providing. It's not in them in a finance organization becoming an expert IT organization, or a pharmaceutical becoming an expert IT organization. That's not the goal. The goal is for pharmaceuticals to excel at what they do, healthcare to excel at what they do, finance to excel at what they do, all of them to excel in that. So there's a difference between the value streams that they're delivering certain type of capabilities and certain type of value to customers. And we need to rank those, and we need to decide where we want to invest our money. When we make those decisions, that may lead to difficult but important decisions that may say, for example, well, then this capability, because it's not core to our competency, it's not core to what we deliver to our customers, we're going to partner with somebody else to do that. Because we want to focus our investment in the areas where we can produce the greatest value. That's a big strategic decision, and it's a very valid one. And when we do that, when we approach it from that perspective, we are funding the capabilities that we know deliver the greatest value to customers. And therefore, we expect the greatest revenue to the company. Until we do that, all that we're doing is we're looking at the totality of the work that we do, mixed in finance, healthcare, IT, all of it jumbled together. And it just becomes a competition against each other on where we're going to put the dollars. And that's where the project plans are important, so that we can make sure that we've allocated the dollars correctly against the project plan. We can't do that if we don't have a plan. So we need to change our perspective. We need to change the way that we view the work, and the way that we manage the work, and the way that we fund the work, so that we are always delivering to the highest value that we can provide to customers. This is a complete change. Now, it doesn't mean that companies need to throw away their current financial systems and replace them with new ones. Companies are going to need to operate in a dual modality. They will continue doing some work from a waterfall perspective, where they can have their project plans clearly laid out and priced out and funded, and they're going to need to support the emergent work that is funded in this different way that I've been describing. I'll start giving you a very basic description on how to fund it. So we need to help finance groups understand that there's these two different modalities, and then how to build the processes, the systems, and the tools in order to be able to support the modalities. So the first thing that the finance group needs to do is to create that different modality, and then to ask the first question, well, what type of work are we going to fund? Are we going to fund traditional project-based work? Great, we're going to use this approach. Or are we going to fund product and service-based work? Great, we're going to use this other model. And that's where AI fits in. So until we use the right model for the type of work, we're going to be forcing teams to answer questions that they can't answer. And when we do that, don't be surprised when reality doesn't meet what was expected, because the team guessed. They did their best at guessing, but they really don't know. They can't know. So we need to go back to the systems that we're using and avoid the inflexible budgeting approaches that hinder the responsiveness that AI work needs. Otherwise, we can't accommodate unforeseen AI related expenses, and there will be unforeseen AI related expenses. If instead we have funded the capability, a certain type of capability in AI, now we can manage the budget within that capability. It may mean that we need to reallocate what we're expecting to fund, yes, but within that capability. And that's what we're delivering. That's what we're funding. And we're tracking. How do we track that this is successful? It's not against a predefined task list. It is against the value that we have delivered to customers. So we have an expectation up front that the work that the team is doing is delivering a certain amount of value. We measure that. Coming up with the way to measure it, I'm going to be very upfront and very transparent. It's very difficult to do. That's a big challenge, and that's what we need to figure out. How do we come up with the metrics and the approaches to measure the amount of value that we're delivering to customers? But once we're able to do that, then we do have the metric to be able to tell, yep, our investment is returning this visibly increasing rate of value that we're delivering to customers. When we finally do that, we remove the financial constraints that are limiting experimentation, because as long as we have the fixed approach, there's going to be a ceiling. The teams are not going to be able to experiment because they know that they're constrained. They're simply not going to have access to tools. They're simply not going to have the time, and they're going to be disincentivized to explore different and new ways of doing things because they know that they are stuck with the plan that was put up front, even though they know it wasn't realistic. So this is a significant change, and unfortunately, in my experience, finance is ignored largely when we're doing these implementations. When we go into it, they're an afterthought, and more often than not, what happens is that the companies employ the systems that they've always used with the expectation that this incremental, iterative work is just going to fit right into it. It doesn't. It's fundamentally incompatible. So when we ignore it, we're really setting up the teams up for failure because there's this constraint that's not allowing this, not creating the sandbox where they can just very creatively move without the constraints of a preset plan, which finance expects. And in a similar way, HR has a similar type of influence on the teams because traditional HR approaches are focused more on individual versus team performance. There's a lot of individual performance metrics, but the team performance metrics, that's not part of the traditional approach. So we can talk to the teams all we want about collaboration and helping each other and keeping the eye on the ball of the team. But when their personal livelihood is contingent upon individual achievements, that's going to conflict with the AI collaborative nature that we need. At the end of the day, people are going to do what they need to do for their own personal improvement and betterment. And that will put them at odds with the team approach that we need, the collaborative approach that we need. It's going to create an artificial competition that is going to undermine ultimately the way that we need for teams to be working. And this applies both with reward systems and punishment systems, where we're not recognizing that what we need is to create the environment, and this is part of the cultural shift, that is supporting the team collaborative approach. And people are going to seek the personal improvement and rewards and avoid the punishments. And that's where the focus is going to be. And that will undermine the collective AI efforts. Career progression is part of it as well. No, it's part of how we determine the career progression for individuals. Again, all of these systems, there are ways to do it that promotes a business agility and doesn't get in the way. However, the traditional way of doing it is directly structured against it. So there needs to be a cultural transformation that the HR systems support, moving us away from the traditional approach into a hybrid approach that supports AI innovation. Again, just like finance, HR groups are largely ignored through this type of work. They're not viewed because they're not directly involved with the technology, but they're not viewed as being affected by it. Therefore, we don't even talk to them. And then we realize that a lot of the team behaviors that we see that are not aligned with the collaborative approach that we need is really coming from HR influence. Um, if we don't address it up front, we're going to have resistance that is going to undermine and potentially derail the efforts. So these are two groups that have a lot of power and a lot of influence in the company and on individuals. And because they operate on rules that are very strict and very black and white, they really create an impediment to the agility that's needed in teams in order to perform and deliver AI work. So therefore, we really need to consider them upfront in any integration, AI transformation. We need to consider them upfront, make sure that they are aligned, make sure that they have gone through the process of incorporating, or at least starting to incorporate this different perspective, looking at work and looking at individual and their contributions within a team in order to set up the teams for success. Now, I also wanted to talk about regulatory compliance and audit because these are also influential teams, very influential teams in companies, and they usually have a veto power on whether or not the work that has been produced by teams is going to go out the door. And they have very good reasons for it. There's regulatory compliance that, if not observed, could land the company in real legal challenge. So there's very high value and need that they're providing to the company. And for the reason they carry a lot of weight and a lot of respect within the company. From an audit perspective, the same thing is we want to have a body within the organization that's going to be very focused on preventing the type of dangers, both for the company and customers, to make sure that the company remains viable and healthy. If we ignore these, we're putting the company at risk. So I want to underscore that these teams are performing a very critical and necessary function. And they tend to be hated a lot. They tend to be viewed by everybody as the downers, the Debbie Downers. No, as everybody is so happy and we put everything together, worked so hard, and then you meet these groups with their big red flags and go, you're going nowhere. We'll talk about deflating, and especially when we're talking about increasing business agility, keeping up with market needs, and the excitement of building something around AI. You want to put it out there. The team puts all of the effort and has figured it out, has gone through all of the challenges and the efforts and the puzzle solving, and here it is, ready to go. And then you're met with the, no, you're not going anywhere with that. That's demoralizing. That can really bring down teams. That can really discourage them. All of the effort put into it, only to see their work collecting dust and not making it to customers. That can have a really negative psychological impact, and there's no need for it. In my experience, working with both regulatory compliance and audit teams has been wonderful. I've always met teams that they themselves feel the heaviness and the burden of their function. They don't like to be the bad guys. They don't enjoy it. Maybe some people do, I don't know. But the ones I've worked with, they don't. They're actually fundamentally really upbeat and really nice people who just want to contribute what they enjoy doing. They enjoy going into the details, figuring things out, and making sure, crossing the T's and dotting the I's. They're people who enjoy doing that, and they're good at it. And they know that they're providing a value to the company and to customers, a safety that everybody needs. And that's really deserves our respect. And instead, what they encounter is they have to fight with people. They have to really struggle to pull the information from people that they just don't want to give it to them. They want to share the information with them. They're kept in the dark. They don't find out until the very end. And that frankly pushes them to against the wall and going like, okay, fine. Well, this is where we ended up. If it's part of my verification of what you're doing, I find that you are at fault. Therefore, this is not going to proceed. That's a terrible scenario for them inclusive. So, how do we avoid it? Well, very simple. I've talked about this before, this concept of shift left. We bring them to the beginning of the story, not just to the end of the story. The reason why they're at the end of the story aligns with the waterfall mindset. Remember that in Waterfall, we create a plan, we execute the plan, and then we verify what has been produced. And as part of that verification, that's where regulatory compliance and audit comes into play. We need to shift the model completely. We need to bring them up front. And when they're brought up front, my experience, they love it. They love it because they're no longer at the very tail end of the process pushed to hurry, 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 give me the answer right away because we need to get this out the door. And they have to, in milliseconds, absorb tremendous amount of information and come up with a decision. That's a high stress setup. Instead, if we bring them up front to the beginning of the process, they have the opportunity to inject their perspective. Remember the plurality of perspectives that I talked about in the beginning? This is part of it. It's bringing their perspective into the work that we're about to do, the product and service that we're about to implement. And they can start thinking about, oh, if we go down this path, these are the type of issues that we're likely to encounter. And they can have those discussions with the teams that are implementing it early on so that the teams can consider that and incorporate that thinking into the work that they're doing. When we do this effectively, when we succeed at setting up this collaborative effort with regulatory compliance and audit teams, their their job tends to shift into a very quick confirmation that we're good because they know what they're looking for. They can find it really quickly, and then they can go, "Yep, this is good enough. We've got what we need in order to be safe." Everybody listened to what we said. This is good. We can move forward, as opposed to the very adversarial check grading that often lands in a fail and that demoralizes the teams. So there's a really a huge opportunity to shift the paradigm while making sure that we preserve the risk prevention that these teams bring to the table. It's all about including them early on. And especially when we're talking about AI work, which is changing all the time. Every time that there's a change, they become aware of it and they can give us feedback right then and there. Oh, by this, implementing this change, this is how the picture changes. This is what you need to be looking at. This is the safe way to implement it. This is a way that's unlikely to land us in problems. So incorporating them can only be a win-win. Again, in my experience, they love it. They really appreciate being part of the process of building the products and services, and makes it easier for them. They are aware along the way, and when it comes to them assessing the viability of a release, they tend to be very quick at doing it because they're no longer having to figure things out on the fly at the moment. They've had the opportunity to see it as it's been put together. And that fosters a lot of collaboration between the teams and these groups. The teams tend to appreciate their input because they have this additional perspective that QA may not have, and that gives them a good guidance to whatever it is that they're implementing. So in order to put this all together, we really need to be mindful about these groups, these four groups. They're really important, and working with them earlier rather than later, not allowing us to be in a reactive relationship, dealing with the aftermath of finance, imposing their way of what we expected of getting information that doesn't lead to reliable results, of HR influencing from a cultural perspective, and the individual behaviors that undermine the business agility, and then leveraging regulatory compliance and audit in a way that helps us make sure that those releases are going to be able to get to customers right away without unnecessary delays. This is all part of changing the culture and also changing the processes, the systems, and tools that these groups use in order to deliver their function, their very critical business function to the organization. So these are the groups that we need to look at. This is how we need to approach them. And there's a whole slew of other things that we need to be considering along this journey. So if you would like to learn more about transforming traditional views about work and the way to support AI implementations, click one of these, and I'll be happy to tell you all about it.